this week, we'll talk to David Bowie. In fact, we talked to David Bowie on Thursday afternoon. It's a very strange situation when you're doing an interview and you have to stop. We had to stop dead halfway through because Thursday afternoon was the day, certainly in the south, of the storms. We were in one of London's poshest hotels, and the noise just got so great that we actually had to stop recording for about 20 minutes and then go back to the business 20 minutes later. At his press conference last week, David said that he thought there were only 15 acts in the world capable of playing stadiums. We talked about that. We also talked about Kylie Minogue, and you can hear the second part of this 7-part interview a little later on this morning. Let's talk about those 15 acts in the world capable of playing stadiums.
Dear me, I can think of about 5. I was being quite gregarious there.
Yes, you were.
15 great stadium acts.
Not all 15, but 5 of them would be fascinating to hear.
5 of them as stadium acts.
Yeah.
Stones, without doubt, know what the stadium is all about. Springsteen, as a solo artist, is phenomenal in stadiums. I have a problem with the duration of his performance, which sometimes goes into a 4-hour period.
Yeah.
And my attention span, frankly, isn't that long. But he certainly has a feel, being self-imposed man of the people. I mean, he sets himself up in a way which is magic when it's put in front of like 60,000 people. I've yet to see Prince in that kind of size. I don't know. One feels maybe Prince would be, again, better in a more intimate surrounding. There's a delicacy with what he does, which is kind of the antithesis of the very muscular performance you get from Springsteen. I anticipate the Guns N' Roses will be phenomenal in stadiums. They were unbelievable with the Stones. I mean, they got such bad press, but I thought they were wickedly brilliant, and they're a very dangerous band.
Why dangerous?
Some of the song references and all that, but there again, you know, I mean, it's an artist isn't there to be morally right, politically right, or spiritually right. If he does put himself up in that position, he's either align himself with the government party, or he's paid to do that. You know, he's an artist for the state, or he's working for a dictator. I mean, we are up there to scream and shout about ourselves and at the world, and you make the best of it what you can. And they're certainly doing that. They are certainly doing that. A lot of young kids with very intrinsic LA street problems, and they capture what a cliche. They do capture the pulse of their audience. They are their audience. There's no doubt about it. There is such a strong feeling of empathy between artist and audience with that band. They're the foremost street band in America in that way, that if you are 18, you tend to dress like that and you tend to feel like that. And they express it so well. And it makes them a fantastic stadium band. I think that's probably the answer with the stadium band. When it is of the people kind of an artist, they tend to work the best.
Oh, this week on Radio 1 between 10:30 and 12:30, bits and pieces of the interview we recorded in a gale in one of the hotels in London on Thursday. Bowie looking as I've never seen him look before, not in the least bit pale, but just so well. Obviously excited about his new tour, excited about the Tin Machine concept that he's coming back to at the end of this year, and still with a lot of questions to answer. We'll talk to him again tomorrow, Wednesday, Thursday and Friday. And on this segment, I thought it might be a nice idea to bring up the subject of the Delinquents film project. Now, the Delinquents, as everybody knows, stars Kylie Minogue. A lot of press reports for a while saying that David Bowie was going to become involved. So I asked him about it.
I think we can put that down to what's euphemistically termed a large artistic disagreement with the producers in the way that it was going. The book that I had originally read and the film that I hear has been made, I have fortunately not seen it, so I cannot give you an opinion. I did see the Rushes.
Did you?
That was the point that I pulled out, because they bore no relation to each other. The book that I read and the film that they were making had nothing to do with each other, and I just couldn't. I couldn't find any foundation for continuing working with them. They had their own way of wanting to do it, and it certainly wasn't mine.
The book is a very charming, rather Edwardian Australian book that is required, or was required.
It's interesting that you picked Edwardian. In fact, you know, she came from a very strong line of socialist thinking. So there was some there was an effort to put her understanding of working class Australian society in perspective through her eyes, and it was a committed effort, and it was a wonderful little book. It really was a wonderful little book, and it should have been a little film.
Yes.
And it should have been an Australian film. There was no room in it for an American who says, I want to get out of this country. And you think, oh, yes, please go away.
You have seen the film.
That was the rush that I saw. And it was that one line that just finished me off.
But having said that...
I will do something which is probably not popular, which is I will defend Kylie Minogue. When I was told that she was going to be cast as the female, I said, oh, yes, she's a Chinese Australian. That obviously is completely the right kind. I was very cynical. And then they showed me her test clip. And I thought, do you know, if she gets the right leading man, she might actually carry this off. She might actually carry this off. And I feel probably that I feel very disappointed for her if subsequently it is a horror. Having spent a lot of time in Australia, I'm not so convinced she's just part of Neighbours, you see, because over there she's fairly well known as an actress. And she's done a lot of other work. And we've seen a lot of her things in Australia from when she was like 10 years old. And she's worked as an actress for a very long time. And she's more than competent, you know. And she will survive it. She will survive it. I just feel sorry that it didn't go the way I would love to have seen it go for both her and the book, you know. It was unfortunate.
You're talking about Kylie Minogue, and highly complimentary about Kylie Minogue. We'll talk to David Bowie again tomorrow at 11:45. Have no idea what's going to be in the tape, just got to get the lawyers to have a listen to it. That's David Bowie. Interestingly enough, when we announced that David Bowie was doing one concert, as he was originally, in London, that concert sold out in 8 minutes. Bowie's main hobby or obsession became fairly clear, and that is that he really is absolutely into travel in a big way. He owns an old Volvo, which he's driven around Europe in. He actually has a yacht in the Caribbean, and the yacht really I guess it must be a tax deal, because he doesn't bother about the yacht too much, but the Volvo he goes around everywhere in. Generally, he seems to be on the move always, leading a fairly nomadic lifestyle. So I asked him where this passion for travel came from.
I think, like a lot of other kids, when I was quite young, people like Joseph Conrad really moved something within me that made me want to move. I mean, the romance, the trepidations, the sense of adventure that contained within that book, and Rudyard Kipling, I have to admit, I know that's not quite the kind of name that one should throw around anymore, reactionary old fart, but on the other hand, he wrote a good book, and it inspired me to, I've always wanted to travel. I mean, as a kid, Tibet was somewhere I always pictured as being somewhere great to go, because it was so. No, I still haven't been there. I got to know a lot of lamas when I had my 3-minute flirtation with Buddhism when I was an 18-year-old. I got to know one of the newly arrived lamas from the Patala, called Chimi Yangdang Rinpoche, who I believe is still here and does translations of the old Tibetan scrolls for the British Museum. I think he's their chief Tibetan translator there. And I do hear from him from time to time. I saw him about 5 years ago. It was the last time, I must admit. And running into him and finding this peculiar energy, which is a passive energy, the energy of the East, the energy of the Buddhist or the Hindu or the animist. I found it so entirely foreign to my code of conduct and my sensibility that I really wanted to explore it. And particularly going to the East had fascinated me from that point. And I got to see some of it, fortunately, not enough as I'd like. I still haven't done China.
You haven't done China?
No, I've never been to China. Nearest I got was Hong Kong, you know. That kind of thing.
What happens when you're at home? Do you get the feeling, right, I must go book an airline ticket, go to the airport and go, or do you get in the Volvo and travel off that way?
Well, not to China. But yes, I have driven through all the great forests in Germany and down the Rhine and all that, and through France and Italy in my own car, yeah. I drive considerable.
What do you do? Do you stay in the sort of, the 2 up, 2 downs? Or
guest hofts, whatever's available, right. Yeah. And when I'm in the East, I tend to stay very much away from the well-trod areas. I mean, so I went to Bali just before. Well, actually, I went to Australia first on a trip before I started recording there with Tim Machine. I went there for a month with Melissa, my fiancée, and Coco and her boyfriend. And we went through the Kakadu National Park, and we explored the whole of the northeast and north of Australia. And we went up the Gold Coast, and that was just a fantastic insight into another kind of Australia, not
Did you
just
take
the
photographs?
bush. Yes, I took a lot. I do take a lot of
Do you take photographs of yourself?
No, never.
Smiling
I'm
broadly
not
at
in
the
any one-
camera,
no.
you know, tourist.
I'm not in one of them. No, I take real pictures. You know, I just go for the shot. I want the volcano as it's bubbling over. And
So it's geographical locations rather than churches or graveyards or
I'm firstly drawn to the romance of the history of the place and its culture. I think the first two things that inspire me. And inevitably, when I get there, it's the people themselves that become more important than either. Because when you start to meet the people, that's a lovely word.
But aren't you lumbered immediately? They'll recognise you.
Not in Indonesia.
Okay.
I don't have much of a problem in Java.
But in Australia, they recognise you
Yeah, in
immediately.
Australia, yeah. Well, that's another reason why one goes to North Bali and not South Bali, because South Bali has virtually been taken over by... It's sort of the Australians' Hawaii or Florida. I mean, they just flock over there to Kuta Beach and salmon and all that. But once you get past the art, the so-called art village of Ubud and start going further afield, it's pretty much, I would imagine, what it was like about 400 or 500 years ago.
When you go to the national parks in Australia, does that make you more aware of green issues? Are you concerned about green issues at all?
Yes, I am, and typically with me, I feel ambivalent about it. In as much talking about it, it worries me that how many times can you say a truth before it just becomes dissipated? There's a point where you actually hear people say, "Oh, not again. We had enough about bloody rainforest."
Yeah.
And that's the danger point, because then the issue just slips away. You know, Ethiopia was so fashionable for that 1 year. It's as dire a problem as it ever has been once again this year. But it means naught. It's not a light. Hardly gets a mention anymore. And that's the one thing that's so confounding about a truth.
Maybe the cliche was in the question, not the answer. I mean, environmental, again, there's another word that's a turn-off
But
word,
yes,
isn't it?
but yes, I mean, he says puffing another cigarette. I mean, it's something that I now, because of others' efforts, not my own. I'm certainly, I'm in that particular area. I'm a follower, not a leader, but I have been made aware, and I was made more aware this time when I went to Indonesia, when I heard about the immense numbers of cutters that have been sent into Irian Java and will probably hack that entire country down within a couple of years. And that's an enormous forest up there.
Difficult question, but favourite country. By favourite country, I don't mean favourite country to live in. But if I gave you an air ticket now, where would you go?
Currently this week, I think either the east coast of Java or North Bali. The reason for that, as an artist, is that I probably produce my best work when I'm in a situation that I don't understand too well, and an environment I'm not altogether familiar with. I'm lousy when I'm in London or LA. Yeah.
Why?
Yeah. The
Other
work
things to do,
becomes
too busy?
flaccid, and it doesn't have anything, and there's no substance to it. And I try to write in Canada. As much as I love Canada and its people, it's very hard to get a vibe there of any consequence that sort of, you know, unless you're sort of forced to live there, I guess.
Let's talk about David Bowie's formative years, which is the kind of thing that you see in Q magazine. About 20 years ago, there was a lot of rumours flying around, I suppose fueled to a great extent by David himself, about whether or not he was sexually ambiguous. Yeah. He often dressed as a lady, very often on stage, and there was an awful lot of doubt about just which way he was going. And I wondered when we were talking to David Bowie if he was confident with being a bloke, really, these days. After all, there's an awful lot of hassle about sexuality in the 1990s, a troubled climate.
Yeah, I mean, I was a child of the sexual revolution.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm very dubious about how a problem like AIDS possibly could be maneuvered into such a way that it produces a new kind of reactionary mentality. It's indeed a terrifying and crippling disease, but we must also be careful that our concerns about that particular disease are in at least altruistic.
You're talking about paranoia against gays?
Yeah. Also ostracizing certain elements of our society. I think it's a really strong possibility that kind of situation could develop all over again.
Ian Charleston died recently, as you probably know, and he died of AIDS. And to my understanding...
Right now, one of our great American artists, Keith Haring, is dying of AIDS.
Isn't there?
And is is contributing a lot of really good written work to that particular problem.
But there was no public backlash here. Nothing but sympathy to Ian Charleston, or for Ian Charleston, and his family.
Yes, as a personality, yeah.
Doesn't that show...
I think when people are faceless, it's easy to hate them.
People often forget that David Bowie, the rock superstar, also has a teenage son, and that teenage son is about to take his A-levels. Taking your A-levels is never any fun. And I asked David if he thought that Bowie Jr. would pass those exams.
I would hope so. Got a lot of O-levels.
If he doesn't get his A-levels, what will Dan say?
Never mind. Never mind. It's simple as that. You know, the one thing that probably... If I had anything important to stress with him, and I'm not so sure that I do, bar communication. As long as we communicate, I think that's the most essential factor. I'm not sure that whatever advice I have to give is not tarred and stained by too many bruises from the past, but I don't know. Maybe some of it is valid, some of it isn't. But I think one thing that I would say to him, and I have told him, in fact, is that whatever decisions he makes now are not irrevocable. That he does not have to wake up every day and think, what am I going to do for 40 years? You know, whatever decision I make now, that's it. You know, there's a lot of room for manoeuvring at this age, at 18 years old. You know, it's a great age, and you should be freed of the feeling that you don't have to make those really important decisions now, because there's so much stress given to that. So many parents will say, yeah, you better shape up, boy, you know, shape up or ship out, you know, pull your socks up, do this, do that. And I'm not a liberal father, but on the other hand, I'm not an Edwardian or Victorian father. I know which was worse.
But why you zigzag so much from one thing to another?
Yes, and it's an adventurous way to live, and it's not necessarily a good way for everybody. I mean, it's provided me with ultimately some of the best and worst moments of my life, but that's my choice, and it's been wonderful to do that. And no doubt I will continue to zigzag for the rest of my life, because I'm of that nature. I'm like that. I do that.
Is there an artistic worst moment you can remember? A moment when you thought, oh my God.
Well, until I had to learn to live with it, I think the re-release of Laughing Gnome almost crippled me.
You might have to sing that on stage, actually.
It was, I know, well, I did put the proposition forward.
Would you?
I thought, I better get in first here.
If they vote for it, will you sing it?
Might use it as intro music. We'll have that outro music.
So let's talk about this business that Jonathan King was discussing in his column this morning. I wondered when I spoke to David why he decided not to perform any of his old material after this tour, why it was the end of the road for all the classic songs. And I suppose also why he decided to embark on the tour in the first place.
It's a twofold reason. One is the obvious one, is that Rykodisc and EMI between them have collaborated to put out all the old material that I've had sort of stockpiled over the last few years. When it came off RCA, I sort of sat on it, not quite knowing what to do with it. And I had approaches made to me by several big companies to put it out, but it was going to be packaged in such a way that I felt it wasn't the kind of quality that I wanted for my work. Having then seen the stuff that Rykodisc with Jimi Hendrix and Frank Zappa, I thought that I'd never seen archive stuff presented, cared for, and digitally remastered like that before. I mean, it's absolutely superb.
Can you explain that? Because a lot of people wouldn't know what you're talking about.
Well, they transfer the tapes to digital process, which means that you get pretty much the sound that was happening in the studio when you were actually recording them. It's far superior to vinyl. And their research team is splendid. And they unfortunately, sometimes come up with tracks that you've forgotten about and sometimes wish that they'd remained forgotten. But looking at them in a different light, some of them, it's quite fun to be able to put obscure tracks on each of the new albums that's coming out. However, so they wanted to do a compilation of all the best-known songs. I stay away from hits because I've actually not had that many. I've had 2 number ones, yes, in America. But things like Changes, which were never singles, are just as well known as, say, a Gene Genie or something like that. So it was a combination of what you can call hits and favourite songs. And so they put an 18-track album together of that. And they asked me if I'd be willing to support it. And I said, yes, because I can think of a good use I can put this to. There has to be a point, rock and roll gets older, as myself and some of my peers have proven, we've got past into our 40s now, that we can either follow the traditional way of working with our repertoire, which is like a Frank Sinatra or a whatever. You go on forever singing your legacy of songs and all that, which is the way that it can go. Or we can decide to do the kinds of exciting and maybe risky things that we were known to do when we started working in music. So I thought what I would do is do these songs for the very last time, purposely painting myself into a corner and giving myself no option other than to develop more new material that makes me wildly excited to continue, if I'm going to continue in music. Because I don't want to be just taking those like nostalgic walks through my career. This will be fun because I've never done it before. I've never done a show where I'm literally, in this particular instance, asking the audience to choose the songs. And I will do exactly what it is they want to come along and hear.
And Walt Disney Movies using Fame, the single, in a forthcoming movie. David Bowie, we've been talking to all this week as a result of an interview I did last Thursday week. And we talked about the phone vote. You know the idea of the phone vote. Basically what he's looking forward to is hearing from people who know his music and know him. He'd advertised the day that we actually did the interview, that he'd advertised the phone number. So I asked him what the idea behind it was.
I said, well, look, I think it would be great. I think I know what they want, but I think I can guess about 10 or 12. What do we do after that? You know, I mean, because some things that I'd like to do, I know like Joe the Lion, are totally obscure to most people, and it's not really the kinds of things they'd want to pay to come and hear if this is their choice. And they said, well, the simplest way these days, because the big thing in the States is the 900 line. And I said, okay, if that's what you want to do, we'll do it that way. Do you think it'll work? And the response so far has been dramatic.
Have you any idea what the most requested song is going to be in the back of your head?
My presumption is that it would be Fame or Let's Dance.
Not Heroes?
I don't know about Europe. Europe's a different kettle of poisson.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And you're going to give the money to charity?
Yeah.
Any idea which charity yet?
Mine would be Save the Children Fund, but I would like some of it split off to the Brixton community as well.
So it's the Save the Children Fund that's going to get the money, and also the Brixton community. And David still doesn't know whether or not it's going to be The Laughing Gnome that gets requested as the most requested song to be sung on the tour by David round the world. Now, he's been recording in Australia. We talked about the delinquents incident a little earlier on, and he's been recording with Tin Machine. I wondered how that had been going.
We did 25 songs in Sydney, and my presumption would be 14 or so will go on an album. And I've left the rest of the guys, that's whilst I'm working, they'll be reworking some of the songs. We're taking a little more finesse over it than last time. The songs should be finished about mid-year completely and mixed and all that. And then hopefully the album will come out about in the latter part of this year, and we'll be going out to support it.
So this tour ends when? This is...
I believe at the moment... It ends in August. I mean, it's.
Then you rehearse and do Tim Machine.
It's snowballing a bit, but my intention is to then go straight into rehearsals with Tim Machine for that late year tour.
Keep you slim anyway.
Oh yeah.